So today we're going to start our lessons on photosynthesis, and essentially what photosynthesis is doing is it's taking light energy and using that energy to make ATP, which will then be responsible for assembling larger sugars. This video corresponds with textbook section 8.1, which is an overview of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the process that converts solar energy from the sun into chemical energy, which is the energy that we can use. And because all of the energy on Earth ultimately comes from the sun, whether directly or indirectly, photosynthesis nourishes pretty much everything on Earth. Because we cannot use the energy from the sun for ourselves, we need it to be converted into something usable, and photosynthesis is the process that does that. Even though animals cannot undergo photosynthesis, we still directly benefit or indirectly benefit from the effects that it has on us. So photosynthesis, the word photo, as you know, means light, and synthesis means to make. So it literally means light making or light makes, and I find that really amazing because all that photosynthesis is doing is using light to make sugar. So sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide are used in the photosynthetic process to store energy and to form plant matter, and that energy is stored in the chemical bonds of the sugars that are produced in photosynthesis. And then eventually this energy can be used to generate ATP in cellular respiration. So that's one way these two processes are connected. Photosynthesis is an anabolic process, so different than cellular respiration, which was catabolic, breaking stuff down. Photosynthesis is building stuff up, specifically those sugars. These are a few of the creatures on Earth that can undergo photosynthesis. So you'll know that you'll realize like plants obviously do this, but as well as algae, but so do some different types of bacteria. And very few unicellular eukaryotes also can undergo photosynthesis, but that's helpful information to know when it comes to the evolution of photosynthesis. About the evolution of photosynthesis, those bacteria will be important. Over here, this shows us a diagram of photosynthesis itself, and down here at the bottom you can see we have our equation for photosynthesis with 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 water molecules, and those form 1 glucose molecule and 6 oxygen molecules. One important thing to note about photosynthesis is it does require the energy of the sun, but this equation down here is only showing us the matter that is used. The sun's energy is not something we can quantify in the same way we can quantify atoms and molecules. So that's why the sun is not typically listed as a reactant, but it is a requirement for photosynthesis. So coming upon 8.1, essentially, one of the reasons why photosynthesis can occur is because of membranes within our cells. So the structural organization of photosynthetic cells includes both enzymes and proteins, which are used to catalyze many reactions, as well as other molecules in the membrane. And remember, the reason why membranes are important is because it allows these chemical reactions to happen very quickly and efficiently. Chloroplasts are structurally very similar to and likely evolved from photosynthetic bacteria. So we talked about it a little bit about how we know that there are some bacteria that are photosynthetic. Now photosynthesis is a series of reactions that are catalyzed by membranes catalyzed by enzymes taking place in a membrane, but we know that photosynthesis probably started in the bacteria, and this bacteria likely had a folded membrane in order to make those reactions very efficient. Today, the photosynthetic bacteria that we know of do have that folded membrane, and if you remember that term endosymbiosis, where one molecule engulfed another, we think that's how our eukaryotes began to be able to photosynthesize. And so we think that the original chloroplast, which now is responsible for photosynthesis, was probably a prokaryotic photosynthetic bacteria living in a eukaryotic cell. So there are two major reactions in photosynthesis. One is known as the light-dependent reaction, aka the light reaction, and the other is known as the light-independent reaction, which is the dark reaction or the Calvin cycle. And we're going to go much more into detail, but just for this one, you should know that light is required for the light reaction and light is not required for the light-independent reactions. So when we talk about structure to function, one important piece in photosynthesis is the organelle of the chloroplast. And this is where photosynthesis takes place in eukaryotic cells. So within the chloroplast, it actually is a membrane structure. So if you remember, the membranes are very important because that helps all the chemical reactions occur efficiently. And inside the membranes, we have these little disc-like looking things, which are called thylakoids. And inside the thylakoids, that's where you would find chlorophyll, which is a pigment that is responsible for absorbing light in photosynthesis. So we'll talk about those later. A stack of thylakoids, or many stack of thylakoids, is called a grana, and one stack of thylakoids is called a granum. And then outside of the thylakoids, we have this other space, which is a fluid. It's a very dense fluid, and this is known as the stroma. And this is going to play a role in our dark reactions. The chlorophyll is a green pigment found in the thylakoids that absorbs light energy. So leaves are the main place where photosynthesis takes place, and their green color of leaves comes from chlorophyll, and the chloroplasts are mainly found in the cells of the mesophyll, which is the interior tissue of the leaf. So leaves are a big, powerful site of photosynthesis. Then what happens is carbon dioxide enters and oxygen exits the leaf through little tiny pores known as stomata. And then, as I mentioned, the chlorophyll's in the membranes of the thylakoids. And then the chloroplasts themselves contain the stroma, which is that dense interior fluid. So photosynthesis is a pretty complex process. We haven't even actually finished figuring out all the inner details of how it works, but essentially what happens here overall is we have water and carbon dioxide plus energy, light energy, and we end up with glucose and oxygen. And there's also some water produced, but the water produced is not balanced out by the water required. So when you reduce this out, you'll see that we don't get any net water. That water ends up getting used again later in the process. So this is showing you how the different atoms are conserved from the reactants to the products. So we start out with 6 carbons, and they end up in our glucose. We have 12 oxygens here and about 24 here. So you'll see we get 6 and 6, which is 12, and then the other 12 here. And then our hydrogens, we have 24. 6 times 2 is 12, and 12 here. So that gives us our 24 hydrogens. Essentially, photosynthesis is a redox reaction that reverses the direction of the electron flow in comparison to cellular respiration. So you probably noticed it's almost exactly the opposite. And in this case, water is oxidized and carbon dioxide is reduced. So in photosynthesis, water gets split and the electrons and hydrogen ions, the pluses, are transferred from H2O to carbon dioxide. So the electrons leave water and they add themselves to carbon dioxide, and that eventually reduces the carbon dioxide to sugar. This process is an endergonic process, so it requires energy, and that energy, it comes from the sun. And here you can see our carbon dioxide is becoming reduced to the sugar, and our water becomes oxidized, losing those electrons, as well as the hydrogen ions, and we get our oxygen. So we'll start the light reactions on the next video.